Fighting with the swords, gone. Playing with the brain, on. Let's play Giraffe Chess Hattrick League Season 3.
International Giraffe Chess Federation presents Hattrick League Season 3 between 10 Proddatur teams. Hello everyone, welcome to India's new 68 squared Giraffe Chess Academy Proddatur and welcome to the live telecast of no draws, no resigns, only win or lose in just 70 moves Giraffe Chess Hattrick League 2024 Season 3. Let us watch Giraffe Chess Hattrick League 10th match between Proddatur Tigers versus Proddatur Kings. Each team consists of 3 players. Whoever team all outs opponent to all 3 players is the match winners. Let us see the toss at the center of the court.
It is the heads toss won by the Proddatur Kings team. What do you select? Proddatur Kings team. They won the toss and elected to play on black side.
And in toss, Proddatur Kings won the toss and elected to play on black side. And here is the both teams lineup. For Proddatur Tigers team, Sai Akhil Tej is the opener and Abhinay is the second player and Gautam Ishwar is the last player. For Proddatur Kings team, Abdul Waris is the opener, second player is the Arvind and the last player is Abdullah. Now let us watch first game of the match between Proddatur Tigers team opening player Sai Akhil Tej versus Proddatur Kings team opening player Abdul Waris. Let us see among these 2 players who will win this game and who will do hat-trick and who will be the hat-trick hero of today's great match. Let us watch. Let us move on to the court. Young Scholar Awardee Proddatur Tigers team opening player Sai Akhil Tej is ready to play on white side. Let us see on other side of the court. Little Scholar Awardee Proddatur Kings team opening player Abdul Waris is ready to play on black side.
Now we can see both players are ready to start. Game 1 of the match. Black side player Abdul Waris is ready to hit the clock. Yes, he hit the clock. Game 1 started.
Pawn to f4, pawn to e6, knight to f3, knight to f6, pawn to e3, pawn to d6, giraffe to c3, pawn to e5, pawn to d4, pawn capture pawn at f4, pawn capture pawn at f4, pawn to d5, queen to e2 and check to black king, queen to e7, giraffe to d0, queen capture queen at e2 and check to white king, bishop capture queen at e2, pawn to b6, pawn to c3, pawn to c5, pawn capture pawn at c5, bishop capture pawn at c5, pawn to b4, bishop to d6, knight to d4, knight to e4, bishop to b5 uncheck to black king, king to d8, knight to c6 uncheck to black king, giraffe capture knight at c6, bishop capture giraffe at c6, knight capture bishop at c6, giraffe to d3, pawn to d4, giraffe capture knight at c6, pawn captured pawn at c3, giraffe captured pawn at c3, pawn to f6, giraffe captured bishop at d6, giraffe captured giraffe at d6, king to d0, knight to f2, rook to e1, bishop to g4, bishop to e3, knight to e4, pawn to h3, bishop to d7, rook to d1, bishop captured giraffe at c6, rook captured giraffe at d6 and check to black king, knight captured rook at d6, knight to c3, bishop captured pawn at g2, rook to d1, king to e7, king to e1, knight to c4, bishop to d4, knight to b2, knight to d5 and check to black king, king to d7, bishop capture knight at b2, king to e6, king to d2, king capture knight at d5, king to c3, king to e4, king to d4, illegal, king to c4, king to e3, bishop to c1 and check to black king, king to e2, rook to g1, bishop to f1, king to d5, king to e1,
Now we can see Abdul
to
Waris is just
e6.
one step away to win by crowning. Yes, he moved his
King to
king to
e0,
e0
crowning
and
win.
won the game by crowning. What a superb crowning win to Abdul Waris. Sai Akil Tej out. Proddatur Tigers team opening player Sai Akil Tej out. And with this win, Abdul Waris he won the first game and still need two more wins to do hat-trick and become hat-trick hero of today's great match.
Let us watch second game of the match between Proddatur Tigers team second player Abhinay versus Proddatur Kings team opening player Abdul Waris. Let us see among these two players who will win this game and who will do hat-trick and who will be the hat-trick hero of today's great match. Among these two players, Abdul Waris already won the first game and now playing for winning second game. Let us watch what will happen. Let us move on to the court. Best Scholar awardee Proddatur Tigers team second player Abhinay is ready to play on black side. Let us see on other side of the court. Little Scholar awardee Proddatur Kings team opening player Abdul Waris is ready to play on white side.
Now we can see both players are ready to start game 2 of the match. Black side player Abhinay is ready to hit the clock. Yes, he hit the clock. Game 2 started.
Pawn to h3, pawn to e5, pawn to e4, pawn to h6, giraffe to e3, pawn to h5, giraffe to h2, pawn to f6, pawn to f3, pawn to d5, pawn to g4, pawn capture, pawn at g4, pawn capture, pawn at g4, pawn capture, pawn at e4, pawn to h4, rook capture, pawn at h4, pawn to g5, pawn capture, pawn at g5, giraffe capture, pawn at g5, rook capture, rook at h1, giraffe capture, rook at h1, bishop to e7, giraffe to f2, bishop to h4, giraffe to g4, queen to f6, queen to e2, queen to f4, queen to e3, queen capture, queen at e3, pawn capture, queen at e3, knight to f6, giraffe to h1, pawn to g5, king to d1, pawn to g4, giraffe captured pawn at e5, pawn to g3, knight to h3, bishop to g4 and check to white king, giraffe capture bishop at g4, knight capture giraffe at g4, giraffe to b4, knight to a6, pawn to c3, pawn to g2, bishop captured pawn at g2, knight to f2 and check to white king, knight capture knight at f2, bishop capture knight at f2, knight to a3, pawn to c5, giraffe to e5, bishop to g3, giraffe to h6, rook to d8 and check to white king, bishop to d2, bishop to d6, knight to b5, bishop to f8, giraffe to e5, rook to d7, giraffe capture bishop at f8, king capture giraffe at f8, knight capture pawn at a7, pawn to b5, knight to c6, giraffe capture knight at c6, pawn to a3, pawn to b4, pawn capture pawn at b4, pawn capture pawn at b4, pawn capture pawn at b4, knight capture pawn at b4, rook to a8 and check to black king, king to e7, bishop capture knight illegal, bishop capture pawn to e4, giraffe to d9, rook to a4, king to f6, rook capture knight at b4, king to g5, bishop to h1, giraffe to f6, king to e2, giraffe to c7, rook to e4, rook to h7, king to f3, rook capture bishop at h1, rook to g4 and check to black king, king to f5, rook to f4 and check to black king, king to g5, king to e4, rook to h4, king to e5, rook capture rook at f4, king to e6 illegal, king to d6, rook to f8, king to e7, king to g7, king capture rook at f8 illegal, king to d7, king to g3, bishop to b4, king to f2, bishop capture rook at f8, king to f1,
Now we
king
can
to
see
d8,
Abhinay is just one
king
step
to
away to
e0,
win by
crowning
crowning.
win.
Yes, he moved his king to e0 and game won by the crowning. What a superb crowning win to Abhinay. Whereas Abdul Waris out. Proddatur Kings opening player Abdul Waris out. And with this win, Abhinay he won the first game and still need two more wins to do hat-trick and become hat-trick hero of today's great match.
Now, let us watch third game of the match between Proddatur Tigers team second player Abhinay versus Proddatur Kings team second player Aravind. Let us see among these two players who will win this game and who will do hat-trick and who will be the hat-trick hero of today's great match. Among these two players, Abhinay already won the first game and now playing for winning second game. Let us see what will happen. Let us move on to the court. Best Scholar awardee Proddatur Tigers team second player Abhinay is ready to play on white side. Let us see on other side of the court. 3 times hat-trick hero, Best Scholar awardee Proddatur Kings team second player Aravind is ready to play on black side.
Now we can see both players are ready to start game 3 of the match. Black side player Aravind is ready to hit the clock. Yes, he hit the clock. Game 3
Pawn to
started.
h3, pawn to e5, pawn to e4, pawn to c6, pawn to d3, pawn to d5, pawn to f4, queen to h4 and check to queen to h4 and check to white king, pawn to g3, queen to f6, pawn capture pawn at e5, queen capture pawn at e5, queen to f2, queen capture pawn at g3, queen to f2, queen to e5, knight to f3, queen to e6, queen to e2, pawn capture pawn at e4, pawn capture pawn at e4, knight to f6, pawn to e5, knight to d5, knight to d4, queen to e7, pawn to c4, knight to b6, queen to d2, pawn to c5, knight to f5, bishop capture knight at f5, queen to g5, queen capture pawn at e5 and check to white king, bishop to e3, pawn to h6, queen to f4, queen to f6, bishop to f2, bishop to d6, queen to e3, bishop to e6, bishop to g2, knight to c6, giraffe to d3, knight to e7, giraffe capture bishop at e6, giraffe capture giraffe at e6, queen to c3, queen to g6, queen to e3, queen capture bishop at g2, rook to g1, queen to c6, rook captured pawn at g7, rook to g8, queen capture pawn at h6, queen to e4 and check to white king, bishop to e3, rook capture rook at g7, queen capture rook at g7, castling at queen side, Queen captured giraffe at e9. Queen to h4 and check to white king. Bishop to f2. Queen to e4 and check to white king. Giraffe to e3. Bishop to f4. Knight to d2. Queen to h1 and check to white king. Knight to f1. Queen capture pawn at h3. Queen capture knight at e7. Bishop capture giraffe at e3. Bishop capture bishop at e3. Queen to g2. Queen capture pawn at c5 and check to black king. King to d9. Bishop to g5. Queen to e4 and check to white king. Knight to e3. Queen to h1 and check to white king. Knight to f1. Queen to e4 and check to white king. Queen to e3. Pawn to f5. Queen capture queen at e4. Pawn capture queen at e4. Bishop capture rook at d8. King capture bishop at d8. Rook to d1 and check to black king. King to e7. King to e2. King to f6. King to e3. King to f5. King to d4. King to f4. King to c5. Knight to c8. Knight to d2. King to e3. Knight to e0. King to e2. Rook to c1. Giraffe to f3. King to d5. Giraffe capture knight at e0. King to e6. Giraffe to d4 and check to white king. King to f7. King to d2.
Now we can see Abhinay
to f8.
is just one step
King
away
capture
to win
rook
by
at
crowning.
c1.
Yes, he
King
moved
to
his
e9.
king to
Crowning win.
e9 and won the game by crowning. What a superb crowning win to Abhinay. Aravind out. Proddatur Kings team second player Aravind out. And with this win, Abhinay he won continuously 2 games and still need one more win to do hat-trick and become hat-trick hero of today's great match.
Let us watch fourth game of the match between Proddatur Tigers team second player Abhinay versus Proddatur Kings team last player Abdullah. Let us see who will win this game. If Abhinay wins this game, it will be hat-trick to the Abhinay and he will be the hat-trick hero of today's great match. His Proddatur Tigers team won the match. If Abdullah wins this game, match will be tied with 2-all games and go for fifth game for result. Let us move on to the court. Best Scholar awardee Proddatur Tigers team second player Abhinay is ready to play on black side. Let us move on to the court. One-time hat-trick hero, Young Scholar awardee Proddatur Kings team last player Abdullah is ready to play on white side.
Now we can see both players are ready to start. Game 4 of the match. Black side player Abhinay is ready to hit the clock. Yes, he hit the clock. Game 4 started.
Pawn to e4, pawn to e5, pawn to f3, pawn to h6, giraffe to d3, giraffe to d6, knight to e2, pawn to a6, pawn to f4, pawn capture pawn at f4, knight capture pawn at f4, giraffe to a7, pawn to c3, queen to h4 and check to white king, pawn to g3, queen to f6, knight to d5, bishop to c5, knight capture queen at f6 and check to black king, pawn capture knight at f6, pawn to b4, bishop to f8, giraffe to e3, bishop to g7, giraffe to h4, pawn to d6, giraffe capture bishop at g7, pawn to f5, pawn capture pawn at f5, bishop capture pawn at f5, queen to e2 and check to black king, knight to e7, giraffe to f4, giraffe to e6, giraffe capture giraffe at e6, bishop capture giraffe at e6, bishop to g2, pawn to c6, pawn to c4, giraffe capture pawn at b4, bishop to b2, giraffe capture rook at a1, bishop capture rook at h8, Giraffe to b4. Giraffe capture knight at e7. King capture giraffe at e7. Queen to f2. Pawn to d5. Queen to f6 and check to black king. King to d6. Queen to d8 and check to black king. Bishop to d7. Bishop to g7. Giraffe to e5. Queen to f6 and check to black king. Bishop to e6. Queen capture giraffe at e5 and check to black king. King to c5. Bishop to f8 and check to black king. King captured pawn at c4. Queen to c3 and check to black king. King to b5. Bishop to f1 and check to black king. King to b6. Bishop to e9 check to black king. King to a7. Queen to d4 and check to black king. Pawn to b6
and set check to black king.
Queen captured pawn at b6 and check to black king, and it's a checkmate.
What is superb checkmate win to Abdullah. Abhinay out. Proddatur Tigers team, second player Abhinay out. There we can see big disappointment for Abhinay. He lost the hat-trick chance.
Now, let us watch most important match winning deciding fifth game of the match between Proddatur Tigers team last player Gautam Ishwar versus Proddatur Kings team last player Abdullah. So far, both teams won 2 games. Now, whoever team player wins this fifth game, they are the match winners. Let us watch what will happen. Let us move on to the court. Best Scholar awardee Proddatur Tigers team last player Gautam Ishwar is ready to play on right side. Let us see on other side of the court. Young Scholar awardee Proddatur Kings team last player Abdullah is ready to play on black side.
Now we can see both players are ready to start. Game 5 of the match. Black side player Abdullah is ready to hit the clock. Yes, he hit the clock. Game 5 started.
Pawn to e3, pawn to e5. Pawn to f3, pawn to f6. Pawn to e4. Pawn to d6. Giraffe to e3. Knight to c6. Giraffe to d3. Knight to e7. Bishop to e2. Pawn to d5. Pawn captured pawn to d5. Knight captured pawn to d5. pawn to c4, knight to f4, bishop to f1, knight to e7, pawn to g3, knight to g6, giraffe to h4, pawn to f5, pawn to b3, giraffe to f6, bishop to b2, pawn to c6, giraffe captured pawn at e5, knight captured giraffe at e5, bishop captured knight at e5, giraffe to c7, bishop to c3, giraffe to d4 and check to white king, king to e2, giraffe to g5, pawn to a3, queen to b6, pawn to h4,
Now Abdullah immediately moved his queen to f2 and set check to white king. It is not only check, it is a checkmate win to Abdullah. What a superb checkmate win to Abdullah. Proddatur Tigers team, last player, Gautam Ishwar out, and with this out, Proddatur Tigers team all out and lost the match. Whereas Proddatur Kings team all outs opponent Tigers team in 5 games.
Giraffe Chess Hattrick League 2024 Season 3. Let us see scorecard of match number 10, Proddatur Tigers versus Proddatur Kings match. In game 1, Proddatur Kings player Waris outs Proddatur Tigers player Sai Akil Tej by crowning in 39 moves. In game 2, Proddatur Tigers player Abhinay outs Proddatur Kings player Waris by crowning in 55 moves. In game 3, Proddatur Tigers player Abhinay again outs Proddatur Kings player Aravind by crowning in 57 moves. In game 4, Proddatur Kings player Abdullah outs Proddatur Tigers player Abhinay by checkmate in 35 moves. Abhinay lost golden chance to do hat-trick. In game 5, Proddatur Kings player Abdullah outs Proddatur Tigers player Gautam Ishwar by checkmate in 19 moves. And finally, here is the result. Proddatur Kings team won the match by all outs Proddatur Tigers team in 5 games. And here is the points table of Giraffe Chess Hattrick League 2024 Season 3. Let us see what are the top 4 teams after finishing off 10 matches. Proddatur Kings team with 4 points stands on first position. Proddatur Chirutas team with 4 points stands on second position. Proddatur Panthers team with 2 points stands on third position. Proddatur Lions team with 2 points stands on fourth position. Each team after playing 9 matches, final points are calculated for top 4 positions. Top 4 teams only qualify for the final playoffs.